and live. Patty, I'm so happy to talk with you. I was telling you that I fell in love with you, but I cannot tell to my wife. This is my only problem.
So I was telling you the story about I was running at South by Southwest to a talk I was late for, and this young man came up behind me, and he was the quintessential millennial hipster. He had a man bun and tight pants and this plaid shirt and everything. He comes running up and he goes, oh my God, are you Patty McCord? And I said, yeah, did I forget something? And he said, I'm such a fanboy. He was my first ever fanboy. So you get to join the club. Welcome.
I mean, I know that there is a list, but you know what? For me, being an entrepreneur, I struggling with people for 20 years, finding the right people and trying to do your best. And so when I saw you, I watched your TED Talk, I think, or was an interview, I don't remember. You were so on point, on the real things that you meet every day and the hard talk that you need to have with people when you have to fire them or you have to tell them the truth. And usually when people talk about HR, they always create these legends and these great Disneyland stories like, we love you, you are my family. But it's not like that. Business is not like that. So I love that.
Part of it is I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. Most of the work that I've done has been with engineers. And if you've ever worked with engineers or scientists before, their world is very digital, right? It's either things are good or bad, they're right or wrong, they're 0 or 1, right? And anything in between isn't a nuance, it's bullshit. So when you hang out with them for a while, you learn to be just straightforward with them because they respect you more. And second of all, they don't get it. If you do all that fluffy stuff, they're like, oh, she's talking to me, and I'll walk away. So,
also, I also think that if you work in the tech sector, the interesting thing is that developers and engineers feel that they are building something. Yeah. And if you are, in any other area of the company, you are, I don't say irrelevant, but you're not really creating, the product. So that's the feeling sometimes.
That's exactly why I started doing my work the way I do now. I thought, how come they're the only ones that get to build stuff? How come they're the only ones that get to invent stuff? I mean, how come I have to do things the way everybody else in the world in my function has always done it for 50 years and call it best practices? We don't measure it. It's like, so you just copy what everybody else does and say, oh, we're cool. And so I started paying attention to real innovators and inventors and paying attention to what they do. And the most interesting thing that I learned is that it's not always about something new. So the way I got to innovate was almost always to just stop doing something stupid.
Right. I like it. I love it.
Isn't that crazy? What a revelation, right? But really, I just started looking at everything that particularly HR people do, but more about everything in the company that people do when managing other people that takes away from paying them to do the job we hired them to do. Right. So you've got to get 5 levels of approval, or you have to get sign off from finance, or you have to get, present it to a manager. All that stuff is time away from doing whatever it is we hired you to do. And so I just started throwing it away, and it worked pretty well.
It worked fantastically well. I have 2 questions before going into the topic of your book and business culture. First, curiosity. I live in UK, but I'm Italian, as you understand by my British accent. I watched the highlights of the Trump-Biden debate, and I was thinking about leadership. So I thought, man, I mean, this is not a good leadership example. And apart from what you can think, about Trump or but they were arguing like I don't know, kids. And so I wanted your take on this. I would love to understand your professional opinion. You see something like that.
I have this running discussion with my publisher who talked to Pio, who manages my speaking for me. Pio is a Polish guy who lives in Lincoln, Nebraska. So, I'm here on the West Coast, and he would say, well, at the beginning when Trump got elected, well, but he's a great businessman. And I'm like, no, he's bankrupted 3 companies. He bankrupted a casino. I mean, the house always. And then as he started making decisions about who he hired, I am realizing, I'm like, there's not a qualified person in the room. And then, if I just look at it just as a manager, like, can you believe the turnover? I mean, nobody's been in. So now we're down to a nepotistic family-run business that's being micromanaged by the least empathetic leader I've ever seen in my life. So I'm like everybody else in the world. I'm appalled and ashamed, and I can't believe it. But from an organizational perspective, from a business and leadership perspective, it's appalling.
Because I think I heard you talking about it once, that probably when Netflix started to go global, you were in a room with some people and thought, oh gosh, I don't have the right team to run a global organization. They were maybe fantastic people or very loyal, I don't know. But and I think in that situation, I mean, if you want to run a country, United States, which is kind of a relevant country in the world, you really need the best people, smartest people, the most efficient organization. That should be, I think, in my opinion.
It's a great parallel, though, and you can get them. Right. This is the U.S. government. You can get the best and smartest people out of civilian life, and they'll come do it because they love their country and they believe in it. But even the best and smartest people need a great leader to follow. Right. And they need to have the same value set. Right. They have to believe that the leader's making wise decisions on behalf of the customer. And I would say that the thing about this particular administration, that if I apply Patty thinking to it, they've forgotten that we're the customer.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And so especially when I talk to startups, right, you've done a lot of this work. I say, look, the most important thing you can do right now is have everybody in your organization understand how this thing works. Right. So how your business works, and that you don't work for each other, you work for a customer. Right. That's altruistic. I told my HR team one time, I said, it's true. We are a service organization. It's not spelled SERVANTS.
Yeah.
And the people that we serve don't work here. Right. The people that we serve watch Netflix in their homes. And we have to make sure that we help put together an amazing team that delivers that. So so from my management perspective, it couldn't be a worse disaster.
But I recently saw also the Reed Hastings book, Rules, No Rules. Yeah. Probably Donald Trump could write a new book like No Rules, Just My Tremendous Rules, or something like that.
Yeah.
That would be a fantastic new idea of how to manage something. Anyway, it's every time that I hear people talking about leadership, they say, lead by example. And the example in general, I also see here in UK, analyzing just from I love communication, and it's not a good example. I see, Boris Johnson or these people. It's great to have leaders or politicians that give a great example and the great attitude, and then you say, all right, well, let's see what we can do. At least the mood is good. Otherwise, it's just insulting each other, and it's not good. So that's it. That was mine.
The purpose is to get stuff done. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we can talk politics for a whole hour if you want to talk politics, sure. But we come together as teams of people to deliver something that, makes something better. Right. And that's from my perspective. I think it also shows in how many people, former members of the administration, have written, really negative books. It's because they have to get out their frustration. right? Of trying really hard and not getting anything done. And that's my absolute belief is that what motivates people at work 100% across the world is to, at the end of the day, say, I accomplished something. Right.
Yeah.
I worked with other people I enjoy working with, and we got stuff done. And that is the most motivating thing that you can do. It's not a bartender.
Absolutely.
I've seen them at work, right? I mean, it's not about nobody. When you go home and you go, it was a great day today. It's hardly ever you go, because the cookies were so good.
Yeah, absolutely.
You say it was a great day today because we
did something.
Yeah.
So let me go back to this to the topic of the how to create a great culture in a company. I absolutely love your concept and ideas and what you've done. So I'm converted. All right. On the other side, I tried to tell you the problems that I meet as an entrepreneur, or the problems that I see chatting with hundreds of different people, entrepreneurs, especially in Europe. So it's interesting because the idea to attract talent, for instance, everyone agree. All right, talent density, yes. I mean, we want the best. On the other side, if I chat with a friend of mine, by the way, this morning, it was a great entrepreneur friend of mine, he said, they cost a lot. And we have less money than our competitor. And I don't know, I saw Palantir, they IPO now $21 billion, but they never turned a profit for 17 years. And in Europe, you can't really do that. Yeah. So how do you solve this problem when you say, okay, this is one of the most important things, attract talents, but you're not really financially able maybe to do it?
There's a couple of parts to it. One of them is people used to ask me, how do you find so many talented people to work at Netflix? And I would facetiously say, well, there's an island where all the A players are, and I'm the only one that knows how to do it, right? But that's the misnomer, that there's this group of A players and they're very expensive and no one can touch them except the certain elite companies. And that's just not true. So you have to absolutely personalize what it is that you're attempting to do in your company. I mean, I had people that I hired that were amazing people, and they didn't work out. They didn't like the culture. They didn't like the way we worked together. I may have hired them because I thought they were the right person, and it turned out that their skills weren't the right ones to solve the problem. And so they went somewhere else, and they were A players there, right? So I'm very methodical about it, right? So here's what you need to do. You need to look at your organization, your team, and go out about 6 months and say, if this team was exceptional, right? If it was like, we were like, oh my God, I can't believe what we're getting done. What would be happening then that's not happening now? Okay. So you can write down all your numbers. If you have numbers, there's going to be this much more revenue. We're going to have this many more customers. The product's going to be this much stickier, whatever it is, right? Yep. In 6 months, time is very important here. This is the other thing that people get trapped about, right? Leaders say to their teams, someday, and half the team thinks, oh God, next Thursday. And the other half is like, oh, he's been saying someday for 12 years. So whatever. Right? So in 6 months, if you're doing amazing, okay, you got that in your head, make a movie of it, walk around, zoom around, find out what are people doing differently. Are they heads down working, or is everybody talking to each other? Or are you spending time with customer? What's happening different, right? Now you say, what would people need to know how to do in order to accomplish that in 6 months? It might be that they might have to be really great with customers and you really have a bunch of geeks, right? It might be whatever it is. They might need to see scale, which often happens in startups, right? Your business never grows like in this nice slope. It always goes, oh my, all of a sudden we've got something here, and now we've got to do it 100 times bigger. And nobody in the company's ever seen 100 times bigger. Right. Okay. So now I'm thinking about that. What do they need to know how to do that they don't know how to do now that they can do in 6 months? Then you say, what kind of skills and experience would it take for somebody to know how to do that in order to accomplish that in 6 months? And then you look at who you've got.
Okay?
So if you start with who you've got, you will get better incrementally, but you might not get this. You might not be able to have the team that accomplishes what you may be, able to do if you had the right team. So then you look at your team and you realize, oh man, I hired half of these people to help us build this thing, and it's built. Right. And now I need to scale it. And I realized that if they walked in the door today, knowing what I need to accomplish in 6 months, a bunch of them wouldn't be qualified. It's not that I don't love them, and it's not that they haven't contributed, and it's not that they're not great people, but in 6 months, the story I tell about Netflix is we realized that we're going to be a third of the US internet bandwidth. Like one day, we're like, oh my God, like in 6 months, what are we going to do about that? We went to our IT team, and we had, for those of you that understand this, we had a data center, right, where we shipped DVDs, but worked great. And we said to them, we're going to need to be in the cloud like in 9 months. And the team said, no worries, you guys go exec something, we'll build the cloud. And I looked at them and I said, if there's anybody in the world that could do that, it might be you, but not in 9 months.
Right, I see.
Equipment, right? I mean, we had to go to Microsoft or Amazon and we had to have people that were operating at that scale, and there weren't very many people in the world that were operating at that scale. And it wasn't that my team wasn't a great team. They're a great team. They were the wrong team.
Well,
so
excuse me,
that's how you afford it.
Right.
You don't keep two teams, the one that you love and that has accomplished stuff and that you're loyal to, and they're loyal to you, and everything is wonderful except that they can't do it.
I see. How do you know, Patty, that some people that you have are maybe able to grow and other people are not able to do the job that maybe they are required to do in 6 months? Because for
you give them a chance, right? I mean, you're honest with them, right? I remember, let's go back to that conversation I was just using as an example. I remember somebody, in the room just looking at me with total panic. And I sat down with him. I'm like, you're freaking out, aren't you? And he said, I can't believe it. I've been here 6 years. Are you telling me I'm not going to be on this team? And I said, I don't know. What would you tell you? And he said, well, I'm not qualified. I don't know anything about this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of a problem, huh? And he goes, well, what are we going to do about it? And I said, I don't know. We got 9 months to figure it out.
Right.
Right. So, but if you're the wrong person, neither one of us is going to be happy because you'll fail. And I like you and you've done great work for us. And the last thing I want to do is set you up to fail because the problem's different. Not that you're different. It's a different problem. So you can have those conversations with people. It doesn't mean they're going to, give you a big hug, but they're going to appreciate you not waiting 6 months to go, oh, by the way, you're out.
Those are tough conversations to have.
You know what? I'm tired of that excuse, to be honest.
Right.
People always say to me, how come you're so good at this? And I say, I practice.
Right. You practice a lot.
It's like people think giving feedback is something you do once a year. And I say, what else do you do once a year that you're any good at? Nothing.
Right.
And so when you start, far out like that, then you can say, but I really, really want to. And I'm like, really? You think you're going to pull this off in 6 months? Let's give it a try for a couple of months and see how far you get.
Okay.
Right. And then 1 month in, we can both look at each other and go, we know this isn't going to work. Right. So let's not torture ourselves. Right. And then a really, really important part of this conversation that took me maybe 5 years after I left Netflix to realize. I went back to the way beginning when Reed asked me, what if we created a great company, what would it look like? And his answer was, I would come into work every day and want to do this, solve these problems with these people, right? And mine was, I wanted us to be a great place to be from, because I kind of wanted it to be cool, like, we were like Apple or something like that. And now I realize that if you approach management and leadership in your company as creating a great place to be from, then you and the people who work for you will always be successful. And so now I say the job of management is to create CV-worthy events. Right? So you want to always have people walk away. And what it turned out to be was, I remember I talked to this person one time about a reference for somebody. I said, how come you didn't call me about this person? They're like, we hire Netflix people sight unseen.
Right.
You have such a reputation for great talent. We figured if they, spent 4 years with you, they're really talented.
Wow. Just like you're a certification of quality, basically.
Yeah, but if you think about it that way, then your job as a leader isn't to retain people. Your job as a leader is to give people opportunity to accomplish great stuff. And sometimes, I was there 14 years, but I'm a serial entrepreneur like you, right? And so the reason why I was there 14 years was I had 3 distinct companies to work at. One, the very pure startup, could we come up with a business model before we ran out of cash that might make money? It took like 4 years. Second one was DVD by mail in the US. The third one was the technology around video streaming. And I left as the company morphed into a content production organization, right? And so I happened to be able to make those transitions, not the last one, because I'm not a Hollywood person, right? It's just not my background. So, but each time I could have leveraged that experience to do something different.
I see. Self-awareness, Patty, and transition are 2 very important concepts to me. I see on myself that for some companies, I had to remove myself from the company to let the company scale, because I'm not, a global organization kind of man, and I need people who are, and so I would just be trying to keep the company to a 30 people, 40 people startup approach. But that's not how you scale a company. So the truth is that you need to be self-aware and say, look, am I good? Am as a founder or not? Because if I'm not good.
And the other thing is, you had started asking me about culture. And the thing about culture is you can't create it and then leave it. Right? The culture for a global, that's probably the most significant changes in Netflix since I've been gone, is the evolution to a global corporation, right? I remember I had this great engineer who was like you. He's an early stage startup guy. And he said to me, oh, I don't think management understands that everything's changing. We don't all know each other and we don't know what each other's doing. And it's not like it used to be. Management doesn't understand, right? And I said, well, Rob, we've had this conversation 7 times and I'm a vice president and I report to the CEO, and I've had this conversation 3 to 4 times. So the first part of your assertion, management doesn't know, is just false. I know that's happening. And I said, do you know why things are different? He's like, why? Because we're successful. And I said, do you know what we want to be when we grow up? He's like, what? Not a little startup. I'm like, nope, we want to be a global corporation. You just freaked out. And I said, it's okay. You can do a series of startups for the rest of your career. You're great at it. Absolutely do that. But that's the reason why I found that some people aren't self-aware about that is no one says it out loud to them. Right? I could say to him, we're going to be 3 times as big as we are in 6 months, and you're going to hate it here. So don't put me in the situation of hating you. when you know exactly what's going to happen. We're not going to not do this because you're unhappy.
It would be bad for both, for the company and for
him. And so the more we realize that we're not a family, it's a team. I've learned so much since I've been gone from being on stage and backstage with other real coaches, from real professional sports teams. These guys talk about feedback. They're literally on the ground with their players and they know why they're hired, and they're hired to win. I was in the audience of a the coach of the San Antonio Spurs. It's a very famous basketball team here in the U.S. And the coach was on stage, and one of the people in the audience said, "Oh, it must just break your heart to spend all year, scouring the country for these talented young men. And then they come and they play their hearts out game after game after game. And at the end of the season, you could cut them. Don't you just weep?" And he says, "No, it's professional basketball." They know. They know they're not going to be playing up here. It's like, and they get to be they get to say for the rest of their life, "I played on the San Antonio Spurs," right? And I'm in the audience thinking, why can't we say that to a 25-year-old guy?
It is.
Say it to a 45-year-old woman, yeah, you're done.
But there is this idea, I don't know why, maybe I see in Italy 100%, in Europe a lot, the idea of, we are a big family and we take care of everyone, especially now during the COVID, we will look after you, no worries. And so the idea of a team, I find it absolutely perfect. It's just sometimes maybe I'm trying to think why
I think what we're doing during COVID right now is really, really helping us all, because if your pet or your kid ran by in back of you, it wouldn't surprise me because you have a family, right? So now we can literally see that this isn't your family, that is.
Yeah.
Right. And so now I think all of us are looking much more holistically about what are the barriers between home and work. And then I'm expecting my colleagues to look out for each other and have empathy to my situation. But, here's what I've been talking about a lot. Like, all of a sudden, everybody on earth, in professional jobs in particular, are working from home. Like that, right? Yeah. Every company I've ever been at and talked to, when I get off stage, they say, "Well, we'd like to do some of the radical things you're talking about, but we can't. We can't because we're Italian. We can't because we're regulated. We can't because we're old. We can't because we're big. We can't be." And all of a sudden, boom, we're all working from home.
That's it.
Right? It's like, really? We couldn't do that? We just did. And so now my message is, you found a muscle you always had.
Right.
We've always done this. And all of a sudden, circumstances pushed us into it. Let's not go back to the way it used to be. Let's not. What about this is working really well? And I think part of it is like, now we're understanding that term family, there's familial, there's empathetic, there's being aware of each other's circumstances, but we're very aware.
Let's go back, Patty, 1 second to the topic of firing people.
Yeah.
Is often a critic. I don't know if it's an excuse or is a critic to the Silicon Valley mentality, let's say. Because if you, watch any kind of keynote speaker, entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley, they say, hire fast, fire fast, easy. But then you go in a country like Italy, and if you try to fire someone, they will sue you the day after. You'll be in court, and they will be back in the company. Basically, you will never win. So if you fire someone, that's it. There is no chance to fire fast.
Yeah,
so you can.
So first of all, if I could give us a whole new vocabulary, I would, because I hate the word firing people.
Yeah.
Right? There aren't weapons involved. There's no blood. But there's shame. And that's what happens. So here's my experience. And I've heard this. You think it's different in the US? 30 years I've been doing this, right? Every lawyer I've ever had says you can't do that because if you do, they'll sue us and it'll cost a bunch of money and they're going to win, right? All these reasons. So we've created all these rules to protect ourselves from our evil employees who might sue us. The same employees, by the way, that you just mentioned, which are super talented people.
Right.
Right. Because you only hire the best. And so those best people that you just hired, when you don't need them anymore, now you have to fire them. Yeah. And you have to prove usually in writing that very competent person is incompetent over some period of time, or surprise them. And so what happens is they say, this isn't fair, right? This is not fair. Nobody's ever said anything to me about this before. This totally came out. This is, you know what this is? This is because I'm a woman.
Right.
Because nothing else makes sense. So people sue companies because they're mad. I've been there a million times. And sometimes they have a right to be mad. Sometimes they've been mistreated. And, you got to deal with that. I mean, I have sat down with leaders and said, if I could take this out of your paycheck, I would. Because you're on notice because this person was surprised and they were mistreated. Okay. So that's part of the answer. And the other one is, I cannot believe that every single employee at every single company in Italy has the same job as they had when they started.
Right.
You don't. You just told me you had 20 different startups, right?
Sure.
So why didn't you sue them all? It's just not true. So I want people to look at the facts and say, is that in fact what happens? If the entire country is full of companies whose employees are suing them all the time, how are you getting anything done? The answer is people change companies all the time. We just keep telling the lie. I had this reporter from The Guardian interview me one time, and he said, well, what you're talking about is quite recent phenomena of all these people changing jobs and, all the mobility of the workforce. And it's recent, isn't it? And I said, I don't know. I kind of noticed it since I started working, many, many years ago. And he goes, no. I think it's like, the mid 80s. I'm like, dude, it's 2020. It's like, what do you say every 50 years or so we start telling the truth?
Yeah, but definitely, Patty, do you agree that there are countries where there is more bureaucracy, or the culture, for instance, in Italy, there is they teach you to go get a job and keep the job all of your life, like this is inside the culture of a country, or maybe.
I absolutely agree. And so then.
You have to deal with that anyway. I mean, it's something.
There's plenty of companies where that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there are companies where experience in the job over many years allows a depth of knowledge that's really helpful. But and the other thing I hear is if somebody leaves, they take with them their institutional knowledge, right? You've heard that phrase. And sometimes I say, well, I suppose institutional knowledge is pretty handy in an institution.
Right.
So, I mean, it depends on your business. And, if you're making medical devices, then it's very regulated and it's very precise. And you have banks have a lot of regulations and rules. And so I'm just talking about how each organization manages within the confines of that organization. And I'm not advocating that you go around firing people. I mean, I was at the company 14 years. But I am saying we should tell the truth that most of our careers are journeys and not joining a firm that becomes your family that takes care of you for the rest of your life. I did it. So Canadians are very similar, right? So I'm doing a talk last year in Canada with 1,000 CEOs, 1,000, right? Raise your hand if you're in the job that you had when you graduated from university.
Like zero,
right? I said, raise your hand if you think the most important human resources metric you have in your company is retention. I'm like, and
you know what, Patty? I love you because you say things like they are, but people usually don't, that there is a little bit of makeup around these topics. I don't know why, but so there is.
And it's funny because I also get interviewed a lot by journalists, right? And they'll say, they'll talk to me about the way things work at work. And I say, you're in your pajamas, right?
So
What are you, or academics, right? I do a lot of work at Stanford here. And the professor will say, well, Patty's talking about what we read in our book. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm talking about the real world. and I love you, professor. I really do. But you have never worked in a company. Never worked in a for-profit organization. This isn't real. So it's, I'm just a truth teller. It's kind of in my nature. But I was a professional human resources person. And then I just realized at some point, it's like, we're just lying about this stuff. What's it gaining us? And we're not telling people early in their careers, this is going to be a big journey. And early on, some of the most important things you're going to learn are the things you hate and you're not good at.
Absolutely.
You may have this fantasy that you want to be a whatever it is. And so I invite you early on to start talking to the people who are whatever you want to be and ask them how hard it was at the beginning, what they learned and what they're good at and what they do naturally. And so, when we can make it a partnership, right? That's the other thing. That whole tops down, we're your family, we'll take care of you. That kind of bureaucracy, it's just stifling.
Yeah, it kills company. That's the truth. It kills innovation for sure. By the way, I remember when the Netflix culture deck started to circulate, and then I want to know if it's true that Reed Hastings just uploaded on SlideShare like this without telling you anything. But I don't know if it's legend or true.
No, it's true. It's absolutely true. It's true. We were driving to work one morning, and he said, I met this woman last night who has this really cool company that publishes PowerPoint decks online. I'm like, God, that is such a good idea. Why I had thought of that. I said, I wonder what people are going to put out there. And he's like, oh, I put the deck out this morning. I was like, you did what? He goes, well, what's wrong with it? What are you afraid of? Or what? I said, oh God, that's the ugliest document known to humankind. I mean, it's just horrible. The graphics are terrible. He said, you never told me it was ugly. I'm like, well,
I tell you now.
And I said, you're going to scare away all our candidates. And he said, only the ones we don't want. That slide deck. Here's the other thing most people don't know about that slide deck. It took 10 years to write.
Wow. That's the point. Because some people think, all right, let's do it. Okay, let's implement. But then
when I left Netflix, every CEO I went into printed it, threw it down on the table and said, we want to do that. You need to help us do that. And I'm like, well, roll up your sleeves because it took us 10 years. And you got to go through all the process and you got to look at it holistically. The part about, back to hiring great people. So we wrote it, if you go back and look at it, it's written in chapters, kind of like, and Reed's book is a lot about this, and so is my book. The chapter about having like high performance employees, right? Having that talent density took us about 4 years to figure out, right? I had to have a killer recruiting team. So I stopped using external headhunters. I just hired them and created a headhunting firm inside my company, right? Those were really expensive people, but they were really good at what they did. And I stopped having those minions of 35 people who just passed around paper, right?
Right.
So that took a long time. I had to be able to rethink my ways of saying goodbye rather than putting somebody on a 90-day performance improvement program when we both knew I was lying. I was just trying to get rid of them. So instead of doing that, I say, here's 3 months salary. Why don't you take some time? Let's brainstorm where you should go next and leverage this so you get a great job, right? That took a long time to convince my lawyers and my, and the finance guys that was a good thing to do. I had to be able to start, systemically teaching everybody in management how to have these conversations with people, because their habit was, I want to get rid of this guy. So can you take care of that for me, HR? I got business to run over here.
That's right.
So I had to say, look, building teams is your job, not mine. I will create a group of professionals that will help you in the whole life cycle of your team. But it's not my responsibility, it's yours. Right. And then more importantly, the hardest evolution was to teach people in management that it was their job to communicate context and not control people. Right. So every time the question was, what do we do in this situation? What's our policy about this? What are our guidelines about this? You have to discipline yourself to say, what would a smart thinking person do in this situation? That's what our policy is.
I love it. Not easy. You can do it if you have talents. Otherwise, it's a disaster. This is the problem.
You can train yourself to do it. There's some really easy tricks, right? So that person that says, this decision that management made was really stupid, and I can't believe they, made that dumb decision. So you can ask them 2 questions. The second one's more important. 1, if you're in management, what decision would you have made? 2, and more importantly, if you're in management, what information would you need to have to make a good decision? And if everybody knows that every time you complain, those 2 questions are going to be asked, then you might start, proactively saying, hey, before you make this decision, I'm not sure you have all the context.
I see.
Right. But that's how you talk to people. And so you train them. You're welcome to have input. We want your input, but we want your input on how to solve the problem, not how to find the problem. Finding problems is easy, right? And people think that's a really big skill they have. Yeah, I saw that coming. Somebody asked me one time what I'd fire him for. And I'm like, ooh, good question in an interview, right? I'm like, if you punch me in the nose, if you breach confidence, I know I'd fire you if we were in a meeting and we were talking about something that went wrong. And you said, oh, I knew that was going to happen, but nobody asked me. I'm like, I'd run you over in the parking lot.
Right.
So that's what culture is. Culture is the way you operate, the questions you ask each other, how you solve problems, how you treat each other with respect, right? So if you're going to hire great people who can accomplish great stuff, then let them, right? And assume that they're thinking adults, and assume if you're talking to somebody, when you talk to somebody sometimes and you think, God, this guy is clueless.
Yeah.
You don't even know what he just said. Close your eyes, count to 10 and say, maybe he is. Maybe he doesn't know. So I can say, wow, that just sounds weird to me. How'd you come up with that? What leads you to believe that's true? And then I might find out something that, maybe I'm wrong. I love being wrong.
Go back, Patty, to the hiring process. And can you help us with some guidelines? Because I've been hiring people that I thought, this guy's a genius and he was horrible, or people that I thought, I don't know, my business partner say, yeah, let's get him, and then he was phenomenal. Yep. So I don't know.
Well, if you use my methodology, you're going to start with the problem that you need to solve, right? And then you're not going to hire that smart guy or that fun guy or that potential genius person or woman. Let's talk about 50% of our workforce, because they may be a genius, but not a genius in solving the problem that you need to solve. So that's first of all. And then so then do not write the job description as someone with 5 to 7 years progressive experience managing teams of 7 people in marketing, right? Write down the problem you need to solve and the time frame you need to solve it, and go find that person. And then when you get together and you put together your interview team, do not include in your interview team the person who is about to quit or you're about to fire. Not good.
Right. That's not a good idea.
Only include people that can ask very specific questions about the problem, right? And then you want to put together your interview team and get together in a room and say, okay, so technology, you're in charge of technology. What are you going to ask? What are you going to ask about culture? What are you going to ask about customer experience? What are you going to, okay, so form that, do an interview in one day. Don't stretch this stuff out. Phone interview if you can. Do an interview in one day. At the end of the day, get together, same people in a room. Do this until it becomes such habit that the teams always know this is going to happen. Then you sit in the room. I used to final interview everybody in the company, and I would ask them, how did it go? Right? Tell me how your day went. And one of them would say, it was great until Stan asked me this really hard technical question. I couldn't answer it. Now I feel like you're never going to hire me because I'm not good enough. So I go to that team at the end of the day and I said, why are we asking our candidates a question that only Stan can answer?
Right.
You have Stan. So most job descriptions, because I've been doing this my whole life, are written to describe the person who left that you wish hadn't, the fantasy person that doesn't exist, or whatever it takes to get it approved.
Absolutely, it is.
And then most managers say, I'm going to need somebody who's really smart, good decision maker, quick on their feet, great leader, good thinker, someone just like me.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 years ago, because they won't be.
Yes. That's a Donald Trump.
And then you wonder why you can't solve a problem, because you got a room full of the same people that know the same stuff. So solve the problem. That's what you interview for. That's how you hire great people. You hire people to solve the problems that are in front of you. And sometimes some people you just love them, right? But you can say when you hire them, man, you are so interested in the product. You really get our customers. You have so much enthusiasm. Here's the deal. You don't have all the qualifications I'm looking for. So we can give it a try, but you got to know that, we've got to solve this problem. And if it turns out not to be you, no harm, no foul, let's try. You can do that with promotions too.
I see.
You can say, we don't know how to solve this problem because it's a problem nobody else has solved, and you've been here a long time and you deeply understand it, but it has to be solved. So I'm going to put you in charge of it. But if it turns out that you don't know how to do it either, we'll have to put somebody else in. Are you willing to take the risk?
Got it. How did you solve the problem of scaling the recruiting in different countries? And since you are not able to clone yourself, you had to delegate to other teams with different culture. How did you solve that? How did you organize that?
So I wasn't there for most of the global expansion. I was there for Latin America. But how I cloned my team was I started recruiting, not overtly, but I created lieutenants all over the company. So great managers who were great at hiring and firing. So if you joined me and you were a new director from Amazon and you had a lot of Amazon bad behaviors and you came to me and said, I'm ready to start writing up this person on my team that's not very good. I'm like, the person that I told you about in the interview that would probably not make it? Yes. So I would say, okay, I want you to go talk to Kevin about that. I'm here talking to you about it. I'm like, I know. But, I got other fish to fry, and Kevin's really good at it. And he's been here for a long time. He's put together some amazing teams and he's had some big misses. Go talk to him. And so I created that, these layers of people in management who knew how we operated, and they sort of helped work other people. And the other thing they would do is if you'd been at Netflix for a long time and you and I were colleagues and you hired somebody that I was not sure about, I would come to you early and go, I don't know about Patty. Because I guess she's technically really good because you seem to love her, but boy, she's not that good, cross-functionally. My team's they don't like it when she shows up. Right. And so then we'd get the teams together and have them work those things out. Right. So it's so much of the Netflix, I've been gone 8 years. Right. Yeah. A long, long time. And Reed just published his book, last week, and you can see not much has changed. Right. Yeah. And they've kept the culture alive because they pay attention to it and they hold each other accountable for it. Paying attention to it is a really important part.
Tell me again, sorry.
The paying attention to it is a really important part. That's the thing that a lot of startups don't get. They spend a bunch of time talking about the culture in the early days. And then they're like, okay, it's done. HR, you guys keep it going. Don't change anything. And then I often talk about the smoke of nostalgia. I say beware of the smoke of nostalgia, because when people start saying, remember how the good old days, that's when you need to put the good old days behind and start focusing on the great new days.
How was your life after leaving Netflix? Because I was expecting you to find you, on a island, to your famous island, your talent.
No, I'm on the island of players now.
Fun, and that's it.
I live in this beautiful seaside town. And
where are you? Where do you live?
Santa Cruz, California.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. So, I'm ready for something new now. I'm kind of tired of talking about Netflix after all these years, as if I was still there. But what happened was I left the company. I thought I would consult to a bunch of startups, but the same thing kept happening. And so I realized that if I wrote a book about how we did it, so I call my book The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Netflix Culture Deck, because I wanted to say, here's a chapter on hiring, right?
Yeah.
Here's the method. Here's the chapter on saying goodbye. Here's how to do the things that we talked about in the culture deck. And so then with the book, I started doing a lot of speaking, and I ended up finding an audience of people I swore I'd never talk to. I said to my team when I left Netflix, I'm like, if I become one of those motivational talking heads, people, come and kill me. And so they all tease me now. They're like, well, saw your head on Facebook the other day.
I saw you and Tony Robbins. I mean, that was...
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's not brain surgery. Right. I mean, I started to realize that people just keep doing things the way they've always done them. And somebody has to say, no, you don't have to do that. And not just you don't have to listen to me, I'm so wise, but I did it. Right. Living proof. I did it. And I didn't do it one day because I'm so brilliant. I didn't. It was many, many, many years of work over and over and over again. And so that's why I realized. And then the other thing was, to your perspective, it's the same issue all over the world.
Absolutely, yes.
This wasn't a California, Silicon Valley problem. I mean, I've spoken in Italy before. I mean, I've spoken in Poland. I've spoken in, Tokyo. And it's the same set of questions, it's the same set of issues, which is, wow, the world is so fast now and things are so literally mobile. And my computer is this thing that I'm holding in my hand now. So how do we keep from operating as if it's 1971?
Yeah.
Right.
Everything is changed. But I in my head, the day you left Netflix, I imagined that your phone started to ring and it was, like, oh, Jeff Bezos wants me, Tim Cook. Everyone. If I would have been rich enough, I would have called you and say, Patty, please come to us. I mean,
he said to me one time, he goes, when you leave Netflix, what are you going to do? Are you going to go run Google or something? I'm like, I'm ruined, Reed. Nobody will have me.
Why? I mean, everyone wants you.
No, it was so radical. It's still very radical. Most Silicon Valley companies run HR like they always have. And then the other thing about when I left, so when I left was 8 years ago, it was at the peak of the last software, .com startup boom. I mean, this is when I walk into a company and their VC has just given them $1 billion. And the lobby of their company is literally a replica of the Oval Office. And behind the president's desk is the most beautiful person I've ever seen in my life. And she says to me, can I get you something to drink? It's 3:00 in the afternoon, right? I'm coming to meet with the management team. And I said, sure. Do you have any water? She goes, the Sparky's not that chilled. So she reaches under her desk and she pulls out a wine glass. She goes, we're pouring a really nice oaky Chardonnay today. Would you prefer red? And then she goes, oh, wait, the bartender comes in at 3:30. Mean mojito.
Wow.
I was like, oh my God, they gave him $1 billion and they have a full bar.
Crazy.
That was when everybody wanted me to come in and make them better, right? So I would meet with their people happiness teams or the chief happiness officer. You can imagine how these things went. I'd be like, what do you do? When you come to work, like, what do you do? Well, people come in and they complain about management. I'm like, then what do you do? Nothing. Do you tell management? Oh, no, they'd be very upset. I'm like, this is a job. So that's a lot of what happened. I did actually, a couple of years into it, I got retained by a venture capitalist who had me work with for a full year, I worked with some of his companies. And that's when I worked with Warby Parker and Nextdoor and Eventbrite and Peloton and really fun companies. And they were right at all of them were at that step functional scale place. So that really helped me. I did that before I wrote my book. So that was super helpful in looking at, what stuff would stick for other people and what stuff wouldn't. Right. So that's what I've been doing. And then I was just traveling a lot until.
Got it. The COVID. By the way, Peloton, I'm a big fan of Peloton. I'm using it every day, and I find it really sticky. I mean, once you start, it's addictive. You can't stop anymore.
The CEO was the guy who was in charge of, I might get this wrong, but he developed and created like the Barnes and Noble reader. Barnes and Noble was going to do, I think it was Barnes and Noble, was going to do a competitor to the Kindle. And it was a big failure, but that was his thing, was he was creating a small video interface, and he was an avid cyclist, and they lived in New York City. And so he took that, and then the reason I met with him was because Peloton is the Netflix model. It's subscription.
Identical.
Right. And so he was like, I said, how are you going to get trainers? He's like, I'm going to get the best trainers in New York City. I'm going to hire the people that people line up around the block for at SoulCycle, because I'm paying them for every class, and I'm paying them for the number of people who are in the class. So if you go viral on Peloton as an instructor, right, and you have your favorite instructors, I mean, I certainly did.
They are They are superstars.
But so that's how they pay them like they're stars.
I see.
Right. So, I mean, so that's another thing that I've really learned a lot, and that I'd like to impart to your audience, which is we can all learn from each other. Right. So John Foley, who created Peloton, is known as this inventor who created this great bicycle. He created an ecosystem. He created a way to pay people. Right. So thinking about, right. So just that's his compensation model. That's interesting. That's a clever and inventive thing. Netflix stories, but when I was at Netflix, a friend of mine got me secretly at one point the parameters for the bonus program for the Comcast executives, right? Or one of the big cable companies. And they were all in their 60s. All the executives were in their 60s. They were all about to retire. And their bonus program was more than their annual salary. So if they made, whatever they made in salary, it was like 2x what they would make in their bonus.
Wow.
Their bonuses were based on increased performance over last year's performance. They were literally incented to only do better than the year before. They couldn't blow it up.
Absolutely.
They were incented to not change.
Yeah. So
we got it. We got it.
I love it. Yeah. Also thinking about how the monetization program, you made me think about the Peloton stuff.
I don't believe in bonuses. I don't think people work for them. I just don't buy it. If you hire the right people to solve a problem that they love, then just give them their bonus. Why would you? I consulted with a company, and the CFO's there, the CEO's there, the head of people's there. They've been working for a month on their year-end performance bonus, right? And they want to go over it with me so that I can comment. And they start talking about it. I'm like, before we get started, can I ask a couple of questions about this bonus? I read the material that you sent me. It's unbelievably complicated, and I have a zillion questions because I do not get it, and I've been doing compensation for my whole life. So A, it's too complicated, just so you know. B, have you ever not paid it? They're like, pardon me? I'm like, have you ever not paid the performance bonus? Well, sometimes we haven't paid. I'm like, but you've always paid it, and you've been around for 12 years. Yeah, I'm like, okay, so let's give it another look. Most of your employees are what, 35, 40 years old. They all live here in San Francisco, the most expensive real estate in the world. So they would like to go to their landlord and say, oh, absolutely, I can pay you another $1,000 a month. Can I pay it in January? Because I'll get my $12,000 bonus in January. I always do. And you've never, the only people you've ever not paid it to are people that you fired because they weren't performing. So
good point.
Just give it to them. That's it. And expect a lot. That's the other, expect a lot. People perform to your expectations. And if you expect your people to be mediocre, that's the best you're going to get.
Patty, I will re-watch this chat and I will write down everything you said, because there are so many things to improve, like basically everything. So it was like, but while you were talking, I found your next move. I would pay to see a Netflix show, the Patty Show, where they just film you. You know, like Gordon Ramsay in the kitchen. Just
yeah. I could go into really messed up companies and go, yeah.
That would be fantastic. You have to talk with Reed and say, Reed, let's do this. That would be better than
I asked Reed last week who plays him in the Netflix movie. And he's like, Brad Pitt is still available. So that's kind of what I do anyway. I just do it with bigger audiences now, right? Like broadcasting like we're doing right now. So, I'm hoping your audience picks up on one thing. I mean, I saw you light up when I started talking about pay. Like, you can innovate that too. It's all up for grabs.
Absolutely. Patty, it was fantastic. It was inspiring. Thank you so much. Your book, powerful. I'll link it in the description all over. And please keep in touch. If you launch your Netflix show, let me know. I will watch it. I'll be there.
To drop into, okay?
Very good. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.